totally fine. I can move this thing out a little bit. Oh, that's right.
Yeah, just like there. Okay, that's all good.
Good?
Oh, okay. Like, no.
Go check it out. Yeah, see how you always do it.
Yeah.
Your head's cut off a little bit, but let me see if I can. There we go.
Okay, so we're good
That's
here.
good, yeah.
And we're also good out here.
Yeah, Chef, we're live now. Chef AJ, can you see us? Hello? Let's see if she comments. Perfect. Okay. Good.
All right.
We already got 2 people.
Yeah.
2 people?
2 people watching.
Oh,
Chef
we're doing
AJ.
live.
Yeah, we're doing.
Oh my goodness.
All right, I'm gonna go bring everybody in. All right, guys, it's Dr. Nathan from Fast and Escape. We are here with Dr. Doug Lisle. He's going to do a live show for us, a live talk. And so just stay tuned, and we're going to start in just a few minutes.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
You're currently live, just
Yeah.
I wasn't even done with my last spot, they had bought me another one.
Yeah.
OMG, like,
Yeah.
done, I was done, so.
Yeah,
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, this is we have fasted on our own, but only for like 1 or 2 days. That was usually out of desperation. Like we get sick with the flu, so we fast for a couple of days, or we have like some skin issues. Like my face was getting like a weird rash, and my lips would swell up. So then I fast for a couple of days until it go away. Like, but never anything this long.
I think, well, you guys are fantastic.
Oh, thanks.
Keep it up.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Where are you gonna? Oh, I don't know, where? This will just sit on the couch.
Yeah.
Yeah, just pick anywhere. Anywhere you'd like.
Whoa, I've never seen one of these.
Yeah, they are too
It's not for people with Volvos, I hear.
Apparently not.
Ah.
Oh, here we go again.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. That's right. Perfect. All right, we got everybody?
Got 2 more.
Oh, 2 more people. Got it. Oh, that's right.
That's what I was gonna do.
We should have Brian introduce himself.
No worries, I'll move it for you so you can all get comfortable. And I'm on day 13 of our water fast, so that's why we're huddled over here.
So it's
Because we have
AJ?
terrible,
Yes.
we have
AJ's
terrible
watching.
breath, and I haven't got to shave
Brian,
my hair for years.
Put that cookie down and get up here and introduce yourself.
Yeah, that. I bet it really is. If you look at it.
This is our first couple of days where we really bounced back a lot, so. We're shooting for 21, but we'll see how it goes every day.
He's looking for you.
Yeah. Well, bring Brian up for a second too.
Yeah, Brian, come on up. We're already live. So.
Yes, we're already live.
Oh, on camera? Yeah, right.
Introduce him. Get right in here so people can see you.
Just right over there.
Get in the middle so they can see you. All right. This is our superstar producer of Forks Over Knives. How
Hello,
about
everybody.
that?
Welcome.
Yay. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here.
Now, we don't actually want to hear anything you have to say.
All right, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Oh, absolutely, yeah. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. We have a little short presentation, or maybe not short presentation, by Dr. Doug Lisle, my friend, my mentor. And so today, if you guys have any questions at the end of the talk, just feel free to raise your hand and we'll do a little Q&A. But today you're going to be talking a little bit about the ego trap versus the pleasure trap. So, yeah,
Got it.
very much.
All right, very good. Good to be here. All right. There's a sort of a long-standing debate over the last, I don't know, 10 or 20 years that I've been talking to people like John McDougall and certainly my good friend Alan Goldhammer and Jeff Novick and all kinds of folks, Chef AJ. And that is, should people attempt to be perfect, and is that the right way to do things? Because that would, in principle, give your palate the cleanest, best shot and maintain the highest sensitivity with your palate so that you could remain on a clean and narrow, healthy path. That's sort of one notion. The other notion would be just try to make some positive changes and don't attempt to try to be perfect. Just essentially don't set the bar too high. Just try to morph your way one wave at a time towards a healthier lifestyle. So this is sort of two different ways of looking at things. We'll talk a little bit about the sort of the merits of both philosophies, and then we'll also talk about some problems that will arise when it is that we're not paying enough attention to either direction. Now, first of all, when it comes to learning anything, it's going to be the perspective of morphing or changing a bit at a time is going to be the way things get done. So this is precisely how it is that you learn to walk. It's the way you learn to talk. It's the way you learn math. It's the way you learn to ride a bicycle. It's the way that you learn everything. You actually learn everything through what we're going to call a series of successive approximations. You do it a little bit, then you do it a little bit better, then you do it a little bit better, and then you do it a little bit better. And that's how it works. That's why we're waiting for another documentary by Brian. This is how it is that people learn and grow. And that's so it would make sense to say there would be a very reasonable process to say, let's begin by making a few changes in a healthy direction and start to substitute some healthy foods from healthy foods that you're doing, and let's move your diet and lifestyle towards a more successful way of doing things. And it gets there when it gets there, just as I don't know. I guess some people are in a hurry to have their baby walk, but I don't know why. It's like, how long will it take to walk? Well, however long it takes. And certainly, so I have people like, my kid's really special. The other mothers are jealous, but my kid was walking at 7 months, Dr. Lisle. I'm just telling you, 7. It's like, well, what's this going to make? Usain Bolt? I mean, what is this going to translate into? Okay, nobody knows and nobody cares because it doesn't really mean anything. Whether your child walks at 7 months or your child walks at 13 months, the truth of the matter is that eventually this happens, and all normal people will wind up doing this. And the same thing is true of talking. So I had a young lady whose husband was very worried about their daughter, because their daughter is almost talking her own fumbly language that nobody could possibly understand all the way past 2 years old. And I could tell by the child's understanding and the child's decision-making socially that the kid was plenty smart. There's like no shortage of brains and comprehension there, but the kid was talking gobbledygook. With a great deal of interesting and appropriate inflections of voice that would go along with what she was seemingly trying to say. So if she was sort of upset and concerned, she'd act upset and concerned with her gobbledygook. And if she's being real friendly, then her gobbledygook would be friendly petting the cat. So this way, I was completely confident that whatever was going on inside that kid's head was fine. That I could see that the child had excellent language comprehension and was producing something, we just didn't know what it was. And then spontaneously, at about 2.5 years or so, suddenly it started to get clear. Okay, and now everything was fine, and clearly language function was all on board the whole time. So these are just sort of individual differences in learning curves about how things are going to work. And we don't worry about these, and I would normally worry about someone going through a process of making some positive changes, and then, oh, I'm having trouble. No worries. We'll just stay here for a little while, and then we're going to try to incorporate something new, and then we're going to move forward, etc. And we do that for a while. It's kind of like learning to juggle. You have to learn first to juggle 2, and then 3, and then when you get really good at 3, then you can do 4, etc. And that's just how it's done. On the other side of this, you hear the voice of Dr. Alan Goldhammer, okay? And he's saying, well, they don't tell alcoholics just change to beer and wine. Okay, yeah, that's not going to work. And so anchoring down the other side of that argument is the concept that you have to be abstinent in order to be successful. Now, let's try to figure out why that idea even makes any sense at all. And the reason why it makes sense is because of a concept called addiction. So addiction is the notion that there is some kind of stimulus that is not normal to the organism. It's going to be what we call supernormal. So it's hyperactivating a circuit. And in particular, addiction is going to be particularly potent when it's hyperactivating, for example, either pleasure-seeking or pain avoidance circuits. So there are other circuits that you can addict. So you can have someone addicted to, I don't know, effectively you could have them addicted to Prozac. So they wouldn't know that they're addicted because they wouldn't crave Prozac, but if they went off Prozac, they would start to feel the effects. And the effects could be relatively profound, and then if they got back on the Prozac, then the negative side effects would go away. So the brain is in fact addicted to antidepressant medications and other psychiatric medications as well. But it's not the same kind of addiction as when you have a motive that is being stoked. Motives are being stoked with respect to pleasure-seeking and pain avoidance. So, and those two things are actually exceedingly close. They have a very intimate relationship in essentially in the way neuroscience or the way neurology is set up. So, for example, endorphins are going to mute pain, but at the same time, in sufficient concentrations, they're actually pleasurable. So when a person is eating, when they're finished eating, they're releasing endorphins. It's essentially an anti-anxiety experience that has a moderate pleasure to it, just in the digestive process. It's a signaling device saying that you just did something that increased your likelihood of survival. The same thing is happening at orgasm. So an orgasm is a signal that you statistically increased your likelihood of passing on your genes. So for a female, an orgasm statistically increases the likelihood of pregnancy, and for a male, it's pretty well necessary. Okay, so this is how this is going to work. So that those are going to create what we're going to call an endorphin storm. Up to that time, what we're going to see is we're going to see a different pleasure chemical or pleasure-seeking chemical called dopamine. So the activation of the dopamine pathway is essentially a device that tells the organism to close the distance between itself and a stimulus that is of survival or reproductive value. So when you're eating and you're excited about the eating, that's actually dopamine circuits that are going on saying keep closing the distance, keep closing the distance, keep closing the distance. So when boy meets girl, he's wanting to close the distance. That's how that's working. So so that's an excitatory euphoria. And then once the distance is closed and the deed is done, whatever it is, then there's a relaxed euphoria, either post-eating or post-orgasm, etc. Or even if you're very cold and you get your hands in front of a fireplace, there will be an endorphin response that will take place, and that will also take place if you take a hot shower. So the same kinds of things will take place, obviously at lower concentrations. Now, so the problem of addiction is the problem of what we're going to call supernormal stimuli. So stimuli that are more intense than the organism was ever designed to encounter and never did encounter in the wild. So no creature ever encountered a bottle of scotch in the wild. The closest thing they ever encountered would have been some fermented fruit on a vine. And once in a long while there will be fermented fruit on a vine. It's extremely rare in nature, but it will happen. The reason is that almost always in any habitat, all the fruit is cleaned off the vine when it's ripe. Okay, that's essentially how that's going to work. Bugs won't be missing it, and the birds won't be missing it. Neither will the bears. So, but once in a blue moon, that will happen. And so, once in a blue moon, you will find some birds will get drunk. It happens. Okay. Now, there are some sort of cool professors with long wavy hair that wear sunglasses, drive sports cars that will say, hey, this is part of nature, and this is how nature's supposed to be. We're all supposed to be getting high. No, that's actually it's totally wrong. The birds are never supposed to get high. They're never supposed to get drunk, because when they are, they're under extraordinary compromise by predators. They're in trouble. They're much more likely to not only be eaten, but they're also likely to make catastrophic mistakes and run headfirst into a tree and break a wing. So, no, this happens to be a juxtaposition of the nervous system that was designed for an environment where there isn't fermented fruit, and the momentary chemical alteration of a grapevine that leads to a bizarre situation where an animal can get intoxicated. It just so happens that their nervous systems are susceptible to this, and they're going to like it because it's going to hyperactivate the dopamine pathway. Okay, so as a result, certainly they would like it, but it's disadvantageous, and it's not something that they're actually designed to defend themselves against. And so animals are not designed to defend themselves against supernormal stimuli. And so for hundreds, probably thousands of years in South America, people have been chewing coca leaves. And they noticed a little bit of a high, tiniest lift that would come with probably akin to half a cup of coffee. And so it wasn't until 1855 that cocaine was synthesized out of there. And then it would be more than 100 years before they figured out how to make crack. Okay, so now by the 1980s, you have people losing their lives and destroying their lives behind a single puff off a crack pipe because the intensity of the experience is so extraordinary that they will now chase it for the rest of their lives, however long those lives are. So that is supernormal stimuli, and that's what Alan and I call the pleasure trap. Okay, so the pleasure trap is the problem that an organism is not designed to be handling stimuli that are above the norm, among the normal bell curve for how intense it's supposed to get. So when it gets too intense, there's this extraordinary signal of the dopamine pathway telling the organism this is what you should be doing. And it will drown out alternative signals that are not sufficiently loud to compete. So a drunk bird may see a predator and it may feel a little bit of fear, but it's not feeling enough fear. Okay, it's literally not getting enough of a signal to guide its behavior to safety. And the pleasure trap, by its very nature, when you have supernormal stimuli, what supernormal stimuli are going to do is that they're going to morph behavior in some way. They're going to cause a recalculation of the individual as to what's in their best interest, and those calculations are very likely to be a distortion of what is their best interest. Okay, so here we have it. We have the pleasure trap, and of course, the most widespread pleasure trap is going to be food. There's the most devastating widespread pleasure trap I think that ever visited a population was tobacco. So by mid-century, 20th century America, tobacco was ubiquitous. It's like I think between 40 and 50% of the adult population were habitual smokers in the United States. So you'll hear a lot of statistics about how we keep getting a little bit older and a little bit older, and how cancer rates are dropping or heart disease rates are dropping, and so you'll hear it sometimes if you read the papers with any care, which I occasionally do before I get disgusted and then just I want a microphone. Brian, you're supposed to. And that is that they'll start patting themselves on the back that it's statin drugs or antihypertensive medications or new procedures for cancer. No, the truth is that smoking rates have dropped. Smoking rates dropped significantly between 1970 and the year 2000. And as a result of very substantial rates of dropping on smoking, as a result, now people are living longer because those diseases are being stoked by a lifetime of cigarette smoking. So that's what we're watching, is we're watching a continued sort of asymptotic tail end effect of as those effects become essentially into the baseline of the population now, which is I think between 15 and 20% of the population smokes, and probably always will. Okay, so from here on out, that's probably what we're looking at. But for a while, we're still going to have evidence that medicine is helping, and most of that help is going to actually simply be because the smoking rates, the per capita amount of years that people have smoked is continuing to drop with every year that passes. Okay, and it will for a while. But cigarette smoking was an extraordinary, devastating pleasure trap, and so the dopamine stoking process of nicotine is significant enough to actually grab a hold of the nervous system, and not the person doesn't want to let it go. It keeps wanting to close the distance between it and the nicotine. And as a result of this, it's the cost of cigarette smoking per capita of an individual that smokes is somewhere around 8 to 10 years of life. So it is an extraordinarily expensive pleasure trap, and it's a whole notch more problematic than any other widespread thing that you're going to see, whether it's alcohol or even animal food or processed food or anything else. Those things are not as devastating as smoking, sort of pound for pound. But they're bad enough. They're pretty significant. So if a person had to make a choice today about whether they should be focusing on stopping smoking, or they should be changing their diet to a healthy diet, I would tell them, and I have, don't even worry about your diet. Okay, your job in the next 6 months is to see if you can beat this problem, because this problem is a monster. Okay. However, for those of us that don't have that problem, which most of us don't, the problem of the pleasure trap with respect to food is major. It's the next man up. It's the next biggest thing, and has profound implications for our self-esteem with respect to our physique and how it is that we feel about ourselves. It has effects on us professionally. It also has effects on us physically, just in general, not only carrying extra weight from processed food, but also the effects of animal food and other processed foods on the insides, wearing away at the cardiovascular system, increasing the statistical likelihood of cancer, all kinds of things. So, and the problem is, because the food is supernormal, that it's above the normal amount of intensity for sugar, fat, and salt, what's going to happen is that people are going to have a hard time staying away from it. So now the question is that difficulty the same thing as, for example, the addiction to alcohol? Because we can see after half a century of investigation about trying to treat alcoholism, we know that trying to treat it by morphing a little bit at a time, by trying to cut down, that it doesn't work. Okay, so if you have somebody that's an alcoholic that's drinking, 2 bottles of wine a day, the solution isn't to say, well, for the next 4 weeks, how about if you go down to a bottle and 3/4, and then after that we'll go to a bottle and a half, and then after that we'll go to a bottle and a quarter, and et cetera. And in just 6 months, we will morph our way out of this problem, just like a baby learning to walk. Okay? Now, that would seem, on prima facie, that would seem to be unbelievably reasonable way to approach things. It is reasonable. It's just that it doesn't work. And there's a reason that it doesn't work. And that's that the pleasure trap is not a normal problem. If it were a normal problem, if we were learning how to build skyscrapers in the desert, we would do it through successive approximation, and we would first build a 2-story structure, and then a 6-story structure, and then we would learn how to do it. Okay? No matter what we were trying to learn how to do, we would do it through successive approximations. But when it comes to the pleasure trap for something like alcoholism, we say, you have to go all the way to perfect immediately. That's the way you're going to do it. And if you try to do it any other way, you're loading your own gun. It's not going to work very well. The way to do it is to go all the way to perfect and try to stay there as long as you can. If you fail, then we go right back to trying to be perfect. That is asking an unbelievable thing out of a nervous system. We couldn't ask it out of any other animal. Okay? Only a human could have the possible capacity to leap past a set of successive approximations and reach for the flag immediately and say, I'm going to do this, even though it's extremely difficult, that I'm going through withdrawal symptoms. I have tremendous signaling telling me that I should be going back here and indulging in this. I've got a whole learning system built around dopamine hyperstimulation that's telling me that this is the right thing to do, and instead I'm going to go against those instincts and do what you say to do, which is to do nothing. Don't touch it. Okay? As you can imagine, it's not very successful. It's not very successful. Okay? It's heroic as hell when people do it, but it's not very successful. And the reason it's not very successful is because in order to be successful, you have to do a learning process that is not successive approximation. You must immediately grab for the flag. Your baby has to go from crawling around on the floor to walking in a day, not go through successive approximations. Okay? Why do we have to do that? We have to do that because the material itself that we're trying to deal with is disrupting the brain that is attempting to stop the use of it. That doesn't happen in any other learning system. If you are learning to ride a bicycle and you fall, it hurts. Can you imagine how hard it would be to learn if you rode a bicycle? Every time you fell, it felt great, you had an orgasm? How is it that you would ever learn how to ride the bicycle? Okay? So you can see, oh, this is a very interesting problem. It's like, whoa, this is completely different than any other type of problem that a human ever faces. And it is. So this is why, Alan will look at this and say, you've got to go for the flag. That's what you're going to do. And why? Because he's seen many people try to go at successive approximations and fail. Okay? However, that doesn't mean that that's always the right way to do it. Because it turns out that there's a flip side to any kind of attempt to change one's life for the better that has a significant threat in undermining our motivation. So the pleasure trap undermines our motivation because we fall off the bike and it feels good. That's a problem, right? This other problem is what I've termed the ego trap. The ego trap takes place when we have when we have people, for example, from the outside that believe we can do something, but we don't believe we can do it. So if we have a young person that has showed promise in math, and so his dad teaches him math, and he gets A's in math, and now he gets into the 6th grade, he goes to the 7th grade, and now turns out for the first time they have a math team. And he's been known among his peers to be really smart at math. And so he takes a little test for the math team, and he manages to get on the math team. Now he doesn't know, they don't tell people their scores. They just tell you whether you're on the team or you're not on the team. So he's one of 10 kids that's on the math team. So he knows, however, that the math does not necessarily come that easy to him. Now his dad has been tutoring him, so he knows stuff that the other kids don't know. And he's got a head start, but he can actually see in his class that when the teacher asks questions about, arithmetic issues or other little problems, that he's a little slower than a few of the other kids. But he does understand it and he does get it, and he can do the computations, but he's not as quick as, say, the top 10% of his class. But he manages to make the math team. Why? Because his dad's tutored him a year or two ahead, and so he knows some concepts that the other kids don't know, and so he looks really fancy even though he's not that fancy. Okay. So now he's going to go into a math competition, and he probably doesn't want to do it. And the reason he doesn't want to do it is he's about to get shown up. And so this is about the time when he tells his mom he's sick to his stomach and he can't go to the thing. There's some way that he wants to get out of this. Most of us have been here soon, in one way or the other. So I've talked to people I talked to a lady that in her young life was a fine artist. And I believe she was a painter. And so she was known among her friends to be a painter, and I think she majored in fine arts in college and had a degree, and then got married, I think had kids, I don't remember the whole story, but her husband did well in life, and she was old, which means she was my age. And so in retirement with the kids gone, her husband built her an art studio out of the back of their property. She'd always wanted to paint. And when she came to me, she had that art studio had sat there for 3 years. Never gone out there. Never spent any time out there. Had some materials out there, but had never actually done anything. And the reason is that she felt that she was not going to be able to live up to the expectations of her friends. That whatever it is that she produced, that she didn't have the kind of chops that they thought she had. So what was she doing? She was procrastinating. So procrastination is the hallmark of this problem. There's a couple other reasons you procrastinate. One of them is you're just flat out overwhelmed. You got 57 things on your list and you just keep putting something off because it's just not high enough priority. But when it comes to things that would be important to us, would be important personal goals, if we're procrastinating, the odds are this is the reason. The odds are the reason is that somebody somewhere, alive or dead, gave us the signal that they expected us to achieve at this level, and our intuition is that we may only be able to achieve at this level. When you have this situation between the expectation here and your ability or our intuition is here, then this sets forth a motivational trap. The trap is that if I do my very best and I achieve this level, I will actually be exposed as someone who does not have this level chops, and therefore I will lose status. Okay? When you lose status, we've got a little word for a device in our head that hurts. It's called our ego. So if you apply for 5 jobs that you expected to get and then you don't get any of them, you come home and you tell your spouse, that was tough on my ego. Okay? Some girl, who's sort of pretty attractive but not a superstar, so the coolest kid in school starts flirting with her, she goes and tells her friends, that was good for my ego. Okay, so that's the word we use about this feeling of this status feedback or esteem feedback we get from others. And if we're in a situation where we feel like others believe we should be able to achieve this, but we only think we can achieve that, if we know that's what the situation is, or we've assessed that's what we think the situation is, then it's going to turn out that we are in a procrastination dynamic. The right thing to do is to fiddle around and not do it, because if we fail, we're going to lose that status. And we want to hold on to that status for as long as we can. So this is why it's notorious in the boxing arena for the champ who isn't sure that they can beat the #1 contender to fiddle around and hide behind lawyers and make all kinds of demands and everything else under the sun. Okay, so that's typical. So it isn't just artists and not just little kids in math classes. It's everybody is always in a situation trying to figure out what do they think that I can do versus what do I think that I can do. And if I'm not sure that I can do as high as I think that they think I can, then I'm in that trap. Okay? A classic example would be alcoholism. So a classic example of this trap is that somebody's a competent, smart, reasonably emotionally stable, well-liked, productive human, and they've got an alcohol problem. And their spouse or their friends or their family or their parents say, come on, just put down the bottle. And what they're doing is that they believe in the person. They've seen the person's competence. And so they don't see why this should be that difficult. They don't see this as setting the bar as unnecessarily high. They think they're setting the bar, at a substantial achievement, but they believe the person is fully capable of that achievement. And one of the problems is because they don't have the problem themselves, they massively underestimate the problem. If you're not a person who is genetically susceptible to alcohol, then you don't know what it feels like to have the alcohol hyperactivate the dopamine pathway and cause an addictive process. You just don't. You have no intuition for this. So as a result, surrounding that individual can be expectations that would say, well, come on, Joanne, when are you just going to do this? So Joanne has tried to break that problem for 15 years. Quietly, silently, sometimes going to AA or whatever, and then trying for a while, but failing repeatedly. Why? Tough problem. Very tough problem that most people never solve. And so as a result, if she gets reassurance from the outside world that they would expect her to solve the problem, but she herself believes that she is unlikely to be able to solve the problem, she is in an ego trap. It's very likely if you do your best, you will fall short of expectations, and now you're going to lose status. So what is it that people do? They inform the community that they are not trying. So they say, don't judge me, because I'm not trying yet, I'll start tomorrow. That's what they do. Okay? The same thing happens with people that have weight problems with diets. Can't judge me now, because I'm not on my diet yet. I'm going to start my diet next week. Okay? That's what that is. It's the same process that's going on. Has the person been able to lose weight before and keep it off? No. Why? Because it's harder than you think. Their slender friends who don't have any idea. They have no intuition about this. Because it turns out that pretty much most Americans are eating pretty much the same food. Some people are 150 pounds overweight. Some people are 75 pounds overweight. Some people are 30 pounds overweight. Some people are no pounds overweight. What accounts for the difference? Genes. These are genetic differences. They're not actually individual differences in the people's eating behavior, because most of America is eating pretty much the same food. So the slender people look at the heavy people and say, well, Joanne, you're smart enough to do this. You're as smart as I am at my job. I've watched you with your kids. You're a great mom. I see how diligent you are. You go to church. What's the problem? Just push the bottle away, right? If you're an alcoholic, and just push the pasta away if you have a weight problem. But it turns out that's not what it is. It turns out that actually that problem has to do with subtle signaling mechanisms of society, that if you eat food too rich, some people are going to be overweight, some people won't. But what if you actually try to get out of the trap? If you try to get out of the trap and eat whole natural food, that's something nobody does. The friends, the slender friends who are so sure that all you need to do is push yourself away from the table, are totally ignorant. They have no clue what's actually happening. They themselves couldn't or wouldn't do this. Okay? And so it's exactly analogous to the situation with alcohol. Okay? And so as a result, what happens? People procrastinate. And they fiddle around. And they say they'll start tomorrow. And then they sometimes make half-hearted attempts. And once in a while, they make a major attempt. And then when they fail, they now convince themselves that they can't do this. And then when people say, oh, Joanne, just push yourself away from the table, what do? Yes, I know, I'll start tomorrow. You know, what does I start tomorrow look like? It's called Weight Watchers. We're not actually doing anything, we're just watching. Okay? This is the culturally accepted thing. Doesn't matter if you haven't lost any weight and you're 447 pounds. It doesn't make any difference because you're on Weight Watchers and you are doing what you're supposed to do. Okay? Now, so what is the problem that we have? We've got two problems. That essentially you can consider that, gosh, terrible, man, I can't think of a cartoon. Yeah, so unfortunately all we get is science drawings. How boring is that, okay? On one end, if we set the bar very low, what we do is we minimize the ego trap and we maximize the pleasure trap. So I had a client once that was 5'4" and 338 pounds, and came to me for a year and didn't lose an ounce. Frustrated client, frustrated psychologist, everything was fine. Okay? Everything was in equilibrium. And one day I finally said to her, why don't you just eat something that is natural? How about breakfast? Why don't you just have some oatmeal? I don't care if you put Count Chocula in it. I don't care if you drown it in honey. Do something, but just, I needed some fiber in that woman. I don't know how she pooped. I actually have no idea how that woman pooped. Makes no sense to me. There was no fiber in that diet. Maybe some pickles off an In-N-Out burger. So anyway, after over several months, what happened is that she went down to about 260. So she lost 70, maybe 265, something like that. She lost about 70 pounds. And remarkable. And then she stopped. Yeah, and I'm like, just any chance we could get some corn on the cob in there? Like, just any, no. Would never make another change. And she said, hey, and now I look like all the women in my daughter's like swim club group. I'm fine now. Now I'm not the outlier. I'm fine. That was that. The only change. Why? Pleasure trap. So what did I do? I took it down to where it was so low that I got her out of the ego trap, and she was actually, you know, I'd had the bar way too high. It's like, hey, we got to make some changes. You got to do. Let's try to figure out what you can do for breakfast. Let's try to do something halfway decent for lunch, and let's try to get some good things for dinner. Forget it. Never happened. Expectation was way too high. I finally rolled in frustration. I rolled the expectation down as low as I could to make one move. And she did it. It's incredible. Okay? She did it, and that's all she did. Why? Not enough to get her out of the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap kept, you know, just too much adulteration of the palate, wound up essentially keeping the person in that equilibrium. Fair enough. That's as far as we got. Over here, if you set it at perfect, so you come out of true north and you say, okay, that's it. You know, no sugar, no salt, no oil, nothing. All steamed vegetables, fresh fruit. You know, eat the orange peel. You know, whatever. Okay? Do it perfect, right? So we're going to do 1 inch out of line. If we do that, what we'll do is we will actually minimize the pleasure drop. So in a few weeks, what's going to happen is that palate will be really sharp, which means that there'll be the minimum amount of sacrifice will be coming because your food will taste very good. Now, the trap has not gone away. It's not zero. So if you stick some seized candy in there, believe me, the system's going to fire up just fine. But it still is a minimum sacrifice. However, that's just part of the problem. There are other parts to the trap other than taste preference processes. For example, energy conservation. This is, being perfect is not easy energy-wise. There's a lot of hassle. It's also rough socially. Okay, how is it we're going to deal with all that? So the pleasure trap, as I've defined it in our book, is actually multidimensional. This is just the core of it, which is taste preference mechanisms. If you go all the way to perfect, you actually solve that problem most effectively. But what you also do is you maximize the likelihood of some failure. Okay? In other words, this makes some failure super easy. Almost inevitable, basically. So unless you're some kind of freak, I know a few. Some of you guys know these people. Alan's a freak. Chef AJ's a freak. I can name about 4. Okay? There's 7 billion people. I think I can name 4. So we know what that means. Okay, so this is not likely. Not very many people will do this indefinitely for their whole lives. They're going to go this direction a little bit. Now, they're not going to go so far that direction that they're going to be all the way down here in the pleasure trap. But they're going to wobble here. And if they wobble here, one problem is if they've set the bar here, now there can be shame and there can be a feeling that you didn't stay up to standard, that somehow the expectation was that this is how you're supposed to do things. If you set the bar that high, then you maximize the likelihood that the ego trap actually gets you, and I will watch this happen. I will watch people that will go away from True North and they'll say, I was perfect for 4 months. And then I went over to my sister's and she had some barbecue chicken, and then it just all went down the drain. And when was that? 3 years ago. It's like, so for 3 years you just like tossed in a towel and just cried uncle. That's exactly what happened. And they're embarrassed and they don't even want to come back. They don't want to talk to any of us, and they don't even look at our websites. Okay? They don't want to be reminded of that they fell short, that they were a second-class citizen, and that their incompetence and lack of willpower got exposed. I don't like that. So I don't like any sanctimonious language that sets people up for the ego trap or lets them have any signaling at all that expects that this is what it is that we should be doing. I don't think so, okay? I will actually tell people that one of the wise things that they can do, potentially, is actually plan that they're not going to be perfect. So once a week, one meal, you plan that you're not going to do perfect, okay? That way you can kind of look forward to it all week. And now you don't feel like, well, am I going to be on my diet now or not? Well, climb in the little steel chute, and then we're going to lock you in for the rest of your life. See you on the other side. Okay? No, that's not what I want people to feel. We have to begin with the end in mind on any project. And the end that we seek is to be healthy and fit. That's the end that we seek. We don't seek to have a special little pyramid put on our head that says that we're a member of a cult who did something that is almost impossible. That's not the point. I don't know, maybe that's somebody's point, but it's not my point. My point is for people to do well. Okay? The question is, could you do something like that, or is that telling an alcoholic 1 bottle of wine a week? Interesting question, isn't it? Now, this would go to how intense is the food stimuli relative to alcohol? And the answer is, it's exceedingly unlikely for anybody anywhere near the normal curve for taste responsivity that there would be an effect on the brain that would be equivalent to the effect of a bottle of wine on an alcoholic. It's just not the same level of magnitude. Okay? So of all of the people that have ever benefited from the knowledge of healthy eating, the overwhelming majority of them are not perfect or close. They made significant changes. A lot of times they morphed their way, as I did. So I started out by morphing my way away from animal flesh, and I did that for about 5 years, and then finally by my late 20s, Alan talked to me again and took me to the woodshed for a while, explained to me that dairy products were just as bad. And I remember that conversation. I was in the kitchen in Charlottesville in grad school, and I remember him saying, Doug, the dairy products are just as bad. He says, McDougall says, he calls them liquid meat. He says, I think they're worse. I'm like, God, I read the books. How did I miss that? I just sort of ignored it. Why? Too much hassle. It just was one too many things, one too many changes. So then I started morphing out of that, and then we leave that one behind. I'm too lazy to cook, so I never cooked with oil, so I didn't have to do that. But the animal food had to go, and then the dairy products went, and then I wound up more or less where I am today. That's where we are 30 years later. But it was successive approximations, and I'm nowhere near perfect. I don't seek it. What I seek is I seek to do well. Okay? I seek to keep my diet somewhere up here to where my palate is sharp and I really enjoy healthy food. Like I really enjoyed the food tonight. What did I particularly like? Corn on the cob and the sweet potatoes, okay? Or the yams. So, whereas a normal person would say, oh, you ate yams without butter on them or corn on the cob without butter. Like sometime in the last 3 years, I saw somebody put butter all over corn on the cob. It's one of these little shocks like, oh yeah, I'm the outlier. That's the normal person. That's how normal people eat corn on the cob, which is amazing. But of course that is how they do it. So we're the freaks now. But where are we trying to be? We're trying to be here. This is a reasonable place to be. And so for anybody, I've had people that essentially needed to start here. Okay, this was too hot, and they needed to go home from the McDougall program, or needed to go home from True North, and they needed to make several good changes. Is what they needed, and we needed to have kind of an agreement about what would be reasonable, and they needed to try that out and see whether they could defend it, and they felt like they could, and if they were to do that, that would be a substantial victory. Okay. There is no perfect spot on this continuum. These two are opponent processes. This is a bizarre situation in human evolution. There isn't anything like this. You don't have a situation where one motivational strategy is going exactly counter to another motivational strategy. It's not natural to have to fight a battle like this. What makes it an unnatural battle is the pleasure trap. The pleasure trap is the unnatural problem. Okay? The ego trap is a natural problem. Scan the environment, listen to what it is that you think that they expect of you. If you don't think that you can do it, then procrastinate. That's a normal strategy for humans. That keeps us, humble and keeps us paying attention to what other people think of us. And when it starts to slip down to where they now think less of us, now we're motivated to show them that they're wrong. Okay, so this is how this works. So the ego trap is something that we can usually manage clinically quite easily. I can talk kids out of the ego trap that have been stuck in it for 3 years. I can talk them out of it in 10 minutes. How about that? That's because it's a natural problem, and once you get to the solution of the natural problem, it unwinds, just like you just fixed it, you just undid a knot. The combo lock, okay? Pleasure trap isn't like that. Pleasure trap is an unnatural problem that's incredibly difficult. It goes exactly against human nature. It fools human nature, okay? That's why, Alan and I, the tagline of our book is Mastering the Hidden Force that Undermines Health and Happiness. It's a hidden force. It's not part of your nature to even identify it. No, it's there. Okay, it makes it very tricky, and it turns out that it works in opponent process to the ego trap in a very particular, difficult way. That the lower you set the standard, the easier it is for the person, but the more the pleasure trap. So look at how this works with alcohol. If you set it too low, they'll never get out of the trap. If you set it up here, which is where you actually need to set it, they're very often going to be in the ego trap and procrastinating. It's exactly what we see. Okay, so this is a schematic of the actual dilemma that we face. So what I came up with, my eyeball estimate about what it is that I think that most people need to do. I set it about here, and this is what I call 80%. And I have a little sheet called starch targets, and it's starch targets that, do you email that around? You posted it on a website.
I can print it out.
You should post it on your website. It's an idea that it's a little sheet that we have 6 check boxes a day, and in those check boxes, it's starch, 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 fruit, salad, and exercise. And there's a grid, so you've got 7 days for a week. So you've got 42 check boxes, and your goal is to hit 34 out of 42 for the week. That's the idea. You're not going to exercise every day. That's okay. Okay? I tell people exercise 10 or 15 minutes a day. Don't have to make a big deal out of it. Put some music on and dance. Okay? I wouldn't dance. I would box. Rocky. Okay? All right. So that's what you need to do for exercise. That's fine. It doesn't have to be any more elaborate than that. So you don't have to go to the gym and put on your clothes and do something fancy. Don't have to get a salad every day. I don't get a salad every day. It's too much hassle. So I get fruit every day because that's not hassle. So I always get that check mark. And then I'm looking to get the check marks of starch, meaning that my meal is based around starch. So tonight I had corn and I had sweet potato or the yam. My meal was based around starch, and so was everybody that ate dinner tonight. So you would get a check for that. And if you had an apple today, you get a check mark for that. And you danced a little bit, you get a check mark for that. 4 isn't bad, 5 is better than 80%. So in other words, if we do this repeatedly, what we're going to find is that if a person's health and their fitness starts to morph in the right direction, and they keep their palate good enough that they keep out of the pleasure trap good enough that they continue to like healthy food. This is, notice what isn't on here. I don't subtract points for the fact that you ate something naughty. No. All I want you to get credit for and learn and incorporate doing the right things. That's what I want you to do. We're not worrying about perfection. We're worrying about getting behaviors that you can repeat because you've done them and you can do them again. Okay? I'm not that interested in errors. I'm not that interested in slips and mistakes. I don't really care. The reason is that if we get a diet that's built consistently around starch being the main component of your meals, and we put some fruit salad and exercise in there, we're going to get there. Okay, we're going to get there. You're going to make a lot of progress. Strangely enough, even coming from AJ's folks, of which I get a lot of call from her folks, who are probably the most diligent and most fastidious and conscientious and alert group that I ever hear from. Even those folks, I will hear about what I always consider the #1 mistake in diet and health, and that's starch. I can't believe it that we're still talking about this, I don't know, 10 years after the Starch Solution and after many of us have read multiple McDougall books. The truth is that's the center of the solution. As we push the starches in, rice, beans, and potatoes, and corn, and oats, as we push those in, we are pulling other things out. Okay? If we fear putting these in, we're going to get hungry and we're going to eat richer food. That's what's going to happen. We're either going to get dried starches. Starches that I'm referring to are always wet. They're full of water. Baked potatoes, corn on the cob, oatmeal, okay, even pasta is wet. We want the starches to be wet. When they're dry, when it's cookies, crackers, Lara bars, etc., those things are all 1,500 to 2,500 calories a pound. Super rich. These things are always between 300 and 500 calories a pound. They're wet. They're what you were designed to eat, and eat as much as you want and be perfectly healthy. Yes, Shayla.
Why do you think people are so scared to eat starches? Like, because I know people that are so scared of eating potatoes or rice or beans. Like, I'm going to gain weight.
Tremendous bad press. I also think that there's something else that can go on with the starches, and that is that people are sometimes desperate and they've experimented with a lot of things, so they've experimented with keto. And so if they'll do keto, what will happen is they'll take away the starches out of their diet, they'll take away the carbohydrate. What happens is they'll dump a pound of glycogen in their liver. And with it, along with that, will leave 2 pounds of water out of your body. So literally in 48 hours, if you switch from a starch-centered diet to a keto diet, you'll drop 3 pounds just of water and glycogen. And you'll say, well, there's the proof. And then if you go back and you I don't know, you listen to a McDougall webinar and have us yell at you, and then you're like, no, I guess that's not what I should do. So then you go back and you eat yourself some potatoes, rice, or beans, and now 2 or 3 days later, you're 3 pounds heavier because we put the glycogen and the water back in you. So now you're like, no, that doesn't work. So that's a huge, mind game that goes on with this. So I think that's one reason. I think probably that may be the biggest reason that drives all of the continued mysticism around this. No, the truth of the matter is that starches are very, very low calorie density. They're at the low end of the scale for what people would have ever used to survive. And so therefore we can eat them, without any concern at all. You eat them to satiety, and you eat to satiety repeatedly as many times a day as you need to, in whatever eating window you want to eat them in. So it doesn't make any difference. You're an animal that was designed by nature to actually seek out richer foods than the starches, and you often got those, but you don't need them. Okay, we don't need the problems that come with the richer foods than starches. So our ancestors ate a lot of meat and they ate a lot of honey. Those are rich foods. We don't need to eat those foods. And if we avoid those foods, we're generally going to be better off. And if we do those things, well, what that means is that we can eat larger amounts of starches than we're going to need to in order to reach satiety. So, but we sure as heck don't need to fear the starches. The best evidence that we have to date on the average calorie density of what human beings ate in their hunter-gatherer state is 700 calories a pound. Okay, the starches they start at squash at about 300. They go to oatmeal at 325. They go to the potato family at 375. They go to beans at about 400, and they go to rice at about 5. It's like, hey, they're all below what our ancestors ate on average. So there is zero need to avoid these things. And when we do avoid them, because if we fear them, then what happens is that hunger drive kicks up, and what do people reach for? They reach for rich food. That's what they do, and that's where the trouble starts. So that's why what I care about is people getting in the habit of morphing their diet around the starch-centered diet with whatever fruits and vegetables and salad and everything else that they want around that. But that's what I want them to do. And if they'll do that, we are going to move the right direction, and we don't have to be perfect. We just have to be good. Make sense? Okay. Well, any questions? Yes.
I have a question. I have a friend who swears that her daughter's body is fine with starches,
Yeah.
but her own body, she gains weight on starches and can't lose weight no matter what.
Right.
Why is that? Is there a certain body type?
No, she's probably just looking at 3 days.
Probably.
She's looking at the same 3 days.
Okay.
So she, what she's not doing, it's exceedingly likely that the following is taking place: that she's not running this experiment month to month.
Got it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's what you have to do.
Okay.
The truth is that people using the scale on a day-to-day basis or even a week-to-week basis are asking to develop what I call superstitious behavior.
Right.
They wind up believing all kinds of things that have nothing to do with the truth. The truth of the matter is, if you're on a very healthy diet, you are likely to lose maybe 2 ounces a day. That's it. The problem is that 2 ounces of fat a day. That's about what you'll lose.
Okay.
You are exceedingly likely to be gaining and losing 2 pounds a day. So what's actually happening, the real process, i.e. the losing of 2 ounces a day, is totally obscured by the fireworks show that's going on with all the other variables in your body on weight, most of which is water.
Right.
But you've got water changing from day to day, you've got fecal matter changing day to day, you've got glycogen stores changing day to day, you've got the amount of urine that you're sitting on. It's like you've got so much variance from day to day, you should not be weighing yourself day to day. You should be weighing yourself 3 times at the beginning of the month and taking the average. Okay, because that's a pretty good out. And then weigh yourself 3 times at the beginning of next month and take an average. If you're 3 pounds lighter, you're really 3 pounds lighter. Okay? If you're really no lighter, you really didn't lose any weight. Okay? If you're 2 pounds heavier, you're probably 2 pounds heavier. Okay? Which means you didn't eat enough starch. That's what that means. Okay. Yes.
So if you're an alcoholic,
Yes.
there are certain foods. I'm a recovering alcoholic.
Mhm.
There are certain foods that are trigger foods.
Yes.
So even though that one day a week that I can
Right.
have that food,
Right.
there's some things that I know that
Sure.
the next day I'll want that food again.
No question. So this
Right.
is, everybody has to look at their own nervous system and sniff out their own little inner alcoholic around food. Okay, so there may be foods that are not a good idea for some people to get into because they'll spin them into a mess. Usually that's not going to be the case, but oftentimes people do have something. So we need to set reasonable boundary around those things. Yeah, so that's a good question.
And then also with the procrastination and the people that are in our lives that have this, idea that you just can stop and
Right.
all that stuff.
Yes.
Aren't we lower? Like, is there? Because I always feel like I feel so beaten up. Like
Yes.
I know I can't reach that.
Right.
And underneath it, it's like I still feel lower. I don't ever feel like, are they just paying attention anymore? Is that why you say it's up? When you're putting your hands, does that mean that?
No, this is what their expectation is of you.
Oh, got it. Okay.
It's not that they're above you. They
Okay.
expect that you should be able to reach this
I
level.
feel like they're above me.
Yeah, you could also feel that as well. Okay,
Uh-huh.
because if they don't have the
I feel like
problem,
they're better than me. Like
Yeah,
they
that's
got it figured out.
right, they've got it figured out. And this is it's actually interesting that you mentioned this because that adds a devastating angst to the ego trap. So here you are, a person that's respected in all other dimensions. Okay, that's why they think you could handle this problem. Right? So they actually are looking at you from 17 different angles, and they say, "You've got this one problem, but I've already seen you manage everything else so well that of course you can handle that problem. How tough could it be?" And the answer is, guess what? It's super tough. Most people never beat it, and you didn't happen to be endowed with the genetic trap inside your head, so you don't have a clue. Okay, so this is it's almost the equivalent is of someone who stutters. So someone who stutters and everybody's like, come on, Jim, just spit it out. It's like, really? If I could just spit it out, I'd spit it out. You don't think I'd spit it out? Are you kidding me? I've got a neurological abnormality in my freaking brain. That's all. It's an end of story. But if you're on the other side of this, you're like, come on, just spit it out. Okay? So this is how the ego trap will drive the stutterer to just be quiet, not say anything. Just pull your head into your tortoise shell. And the same thing will happen whenever, whether it's with drug and alcohol addiction or whether it's weight management and diets. This will cause people, or whether it's art students or some kid that's supposed to be a genius and he's supposed to go to the Ivy League, and watch him crash his GPA. Watch him find a way to undermine his own success because he's feeling the crushing burden of the ego trap. So that's why whenever I hear sounds that smell like the ego trap, I want to speak up. Okay? That's why, Alan can't help himself. This is where he wants to put the bar. I understand that. He's seen people fail because they didn't put the bar high enough. And so have I. Okay? But I've seen an awful lot of people fail because when they went to here for a weekend, then they said, oh, wow, I don't have what it takes and I can't do this and I just can't do this thing, so the hell with it. Right. I have seen that 400 times in my career. And I know that if they did a good job for a period of time, they can do a pretty good job indefinitely. Okay, if they were perfect for 4 months, I know they can be 90% of perfect for the rest of their life. I know that that is exceedingly likely to be the case because this isn't the same as alcohol or heroin. Okay, it's a muted version. It's more like coffee. It's about the same level of coffee. Can people get off coffee and stay off coffee indefinitely? Yes. If they go back and have a cup of coffee, are they addicted for the rest of their life? No. They just got a little challenge. Okay? And there are absolutely people that can have a cup of coffee now and then and not have it, all over the place of their life. So it's about at that level. It's enough that it needs to be respected. It's not trivial, but it also doesn't need to be feared. And that's what I'm trying to have people feel. Don't fear this thing. Don't be intimidated by it. Respect it. And that's how we want to look at the problem. Okay? Yes?
It's kind of hard to say, but the 80%, let's say you shoot for the 80% mark at first, right?
Yes.
Now, what type of health problems will you have, if you go all the way down to 0, you're going to have health problems, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you shoot for 80%,
yes.
Have you seen people, what does that cut out?
What's the difference between this and this?
Yes.
Almost nothing. Almost nothing. No. It turns out that you're within the thresholds for essentially all bodily systems. Yes. Thank you. It's so good to have people live asking questions because there's all these questions that I don't think of to ask, that I don't think of to answer. Absolutely. Okay. In nature and in biology, there's things called thresholds. So, for example, how much sun should you need? Well, optimal, Doug. It turns out that since you're in Southern California, just this thing, it turns out that 17 minutes and 42 seconds. Really? Well, what if I get 10 minutes today? Answer, it's functionally equivalent. Okay? So if you are here, it's functionally equivalent. It would be, in principle, what would be the optimal amount for you to be walking tomorrow, right, in the next year? 1.3 miles. Well, what if we do half a mile? What then? Answer, pretty close. You get 95% of the benefit, you see? And so this is the notion here. So we want to be good enough that we stay within the thresholds of the body's ability to deal with it. And that's what this is. This will keep people out of heart disease. This will get almost all of the influence of anti-cancer potency that we have with a vegan diet, which is modest. It's not huge. The biggest thing that a vegan diet can do is that it can essentially rule out cardiovascular disease, which is the biggest one. It's also that, along with that, obviously, is going to be strokes. And along with that's going to be type 2 diabetes and get your feet cut off. and also you're going to be fit and you're going to feel good and you're going to be highly functional. So there's a tremendous amount of good here. The difference between here and here is the difference between Alan and I staring each other down to figure out who's going to die first. we'll worry about that one later. Okay.
Where do you get that list of the, is there really a list of
Yes.
the seven?
Nathan will get to you.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Nathan will get to you. Yes. Yeah, John.
The exercise paradox you referred to previously, whereby those hunters
Yes.
in Tanzania running 15 miles a day,
Yes.
they use about the same amount of energy as an office worker in the West, maybe walking half a mile a day.
Yes.
And so the idea being then is that people are taking surplus energy from other systems, including supporting immune systems,
Yes.
to support the extra walking.
Yes.
It just seems counterintuitive that there's so much extra surplus energy
Yes.
being taken from all those other systems
Right.
to support them, the idea of moving. What I'm going to ask is, there's been put out there that if you have a whole bunch of muscles,
Yes.
your resting metabolic rate is higher, and you're going to burn more calories per day if you're all muscled up.
Probably true to some degree. I'm sure it is true. But it's also true you're going to be hungry. So the people are always monkeying around with this, looking for the magic solution to being fit. So they'll say things like, this was the big argument that made Covert Bailey rich. The idea that, getting fit, getting strong, that's the answer, because that's going to burn more calories while you sleep. It's like, well, Covert, did you think of the following? That if you burn more calories than you sleep, then when you wake up, you're going to be hungrier. Of course! It's as if the brain is not interconnected and it's not reading all these things. Your hunger drive is a piece of evolutionary wizardry that is looking at all kinds of multiple factors, including what's the temperature in this room, how many times did you go up the stairs, did you step outside, for 5 minutes and get cool. In other words, the hunger drive is responsive to an unbelievably complex array of inputs, including, did you play checkers with your friend that you wanted to beat? Because you would have used your brain that much harder, you would have burned a few more calories. So the thing is extremely sophisticated, so you can't sneak past it 5 extra pounds of muscle that's burning an extra 100 calories and then think that that's going to keep you slim. It's never going to work that way. It's just simply going to up your hunger drive by that same 100 calories. So the solution is simply to eat the food of your natural history. No matter how much exercise you do, whether it's a lot or it's a very modest amount, the hunger drive will beautifully organize itself around that. Our solution is to be eating a diet that in its entirety is at a reasonable level of calorie density. That is actually the solution. It doesn't have to be 500 calories a pound or 600 calories a pound or 472 calories a pound. It doesn't have to be anything. It just has to probably be not very far north of 700. Okay, and that's probably what it needs to be. So that means you're going to have some rich things from time to time. So I eat pasta, it's 900 calories a pound. But I'm putting on there what? Tomato sauce, which is 200 calories a pound. And I put some asparagus in there, which is 200 calories a pound. So when I'm all done, it's probably 700 calories a pound, right in the kill zone for a hunter-gatherer. And I didn't cram down a salad if I didn't want it to lower my calorie density of my meal. Not going to have an ulcer over it. Okay? So the idea is get it pretty good. And if we get it pretty good, we should get essentially all of the health benefits. I would say this, and we'll have people that will come to True North, that will come to Fasting Escape, and once in a while you're going to have somebody that is very ill. Okay? So they've got a kidney that's down to 25% function. At that point, they better eat the way Nathan would tell you to eat. In other words, tighter. Okay? We better go to here or awfully close because we don't have almost any organ capacity to deal with anything outside the lines. Okay? But that's a different issue. So if we've got a known serious pathology, we need to take it all the way here, at least to a point where we get safe. Okay? But otherwise, all things being equal, otherwise, we need to stay within thresholds. That's what we need to do. Okay? All right. One more question. Yes?
So when you do eat something that's not perfect on
Yeah.
the plan, do you think after you fast and you gotten your taste buds a little bit more adjusted, you'll feel full sooner than you would have before, though. Because, you know, like my little sister, she can eat like half as much as me. That's why she's half the size of me.
Yeah.
And she's full, but I never feel full. So
Right.
that's what I'm hoping to get from fasting too. So do you think if I did eat something bad, I would feel full faster?
No.
Oh, really?
This is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is the reason why your sisters have the size is individual genetic differences. The reason why you're carrying extra weight isn't because we've got anything wrong with your satiety mechanism. Nothing wrong with it. Okay, you say, well, I just don't feel full. Well, feeling full is a vague concept. Okay, it's not like, oh, a little thing goes off and says, that's it, I'm full. That's not how it works. It's fluid. Okay? It's like, well, I'm full unless you bring out something really rich, at which point I'm not so full. Okay? All right? So in other words, it's meant to be a fluid concept. So the reason why some people carry extra weight, most people do in the modern environment, is because they're eating a diet that's north of 700 calories a pound. That's why. Okay, so that means no animal consciously regulates its hunger drive other than a frickin' human with not late 20th century with a calculator trying to measure a thing called calories. It's insane. Okay, so instead, what we want to do is don't even be thinking about amounts. Don't be consciously trying to eat less. Don't do anything. But what we do need to do is we need to be making choices about what we're eating. So we need to have the diet. Essentially, the consciousness is aiming the diet towards 500 to 600 calorie pound type food. That's a meal when you look at it should look like it's 500 or 600 calories a pound. That's what it should look like. And so if it's jam on Ezekiel bread with earth balance, that's not what that looks like. It looks like 1,700 calorie pound bread, 4,000 calorie pound butter, and 1,400 calorie pound jam. That's what that looks like. You know, an almond butter sandwich. Well, an almond butter sandwich is 2,000 calories a pound. That's 2.5 times the calorie density of steak. Okay, that's how you wind up with vegans struggling with their weight. It's because they're eating better choices with respect to the animal kingdom, but they're eating processed, very rich, high-fat foods. So our job is to that's what you need to be paying attention to. Please don't worry about your satiation mechanisms because they work fine. Okay? All right. That's enough for one night. Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Nathan. Brian, really good to see you. All right. Fabulous. Gotcha. All right, we're good.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.